From Washington to Wellington, has Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern just saved her job? Asks NBR columnist Duncan Garner in his latest Duncan Disorderly piece. So, Duncan, what did you conclude?
Um, these things, there's never one event that saves a Prime Minister's job. I've really raised the question that it's such a big deal getting a meeting with the President. It wasn't guaranteed. There was no guaranteed meeting with the President when Jacinda Ardern went over there. So it was a big risk. She could have easily come back without a meeting. The fact that she's had effusive praise from President Joe Biden is impressive. She'll take that, bank it, and head home, and hopefully that impresses the masses at home. I never think it does. I don't. I think these things are largely for the domestic market. I don't know if we got anything solid out of the meeting at all. Do you think about China and the Pacific and so forth? There's nothing really concrete there. And what we've got is the PM and lots of nice photos and him saying lots of nice things about it. I think this, and I've been to a number of these events before with Helen Clark and John Key. I think this plays to a domestic market. I think this is all about the PM being validated by someone in high office from overseas, and she's hoping it plays well at home where she's down in the polls.
You think it's style over substance then?
I absolutely do. And I've been on trips with John Key to meet Obama and Helen Clark to meet George Bush. And it's about getting the meeting. It's about the photos. It's about the photo opportunity. It's about being there and having yourself validated and praised by Biden. I mean, his praise of Ardern was praise I hadn't seen before. I mean, Obama and Key got on. They were like golfing buddies. We weren't even sure they were political mates. They were golfing buddies. Clark and Bush were on different pages on free trade and so forth, but they still had the meeting. But Biden was effusive in his praise for Jacinda. He talked about her in glowing terms. There's such a disconnect between what you're getting in Washington compared to what you get in the Waikato, around Jacinda Ardern. It's a huge, big difference between. It's just a massive disconnect between the voting population in the Waikato, they say, and the lovies of Washington who admire her.
What's National done at the moment to get ahead of the polls then, if you don't think Jacinda Ardern's done particularly well this time round?
Well, they've gone back in the polls after the budget, which you don't want to spend $6 billion of new money in a budget, spend $128 billion and go backwards in the polls. Now, who spends $128 billion and becomes less popular? So it's a real problem for Labor. I think the phone's probably off the hook a bit there. What Luxon has done is nothing. He's letting inflation go door to door in New Zealand households, taking away a bit of this purchasing power in every household, and largely kept his head down. He made a few gaffes in the last couple of months. Policy on the hoof, he's making things up. So his big advantage right now is saying nothing and let the economy do the talking. And the economy looks like we may well be heading into recession. Certainly the numbers don't look great. So his best approach might be to say very little and hope that the fish rots from the head down. That's the government, of course.
If New Zealand does go into a recession, do you think it's game over for Labor and the Prime Minister?
I think it's really hard. There's two schools of thought here. Some people say you stick with the current status quo, but I think they've worn out the tread on the tyres. They've almost got a third termitis in the second term. And I say this on the basis that they've been managing a pandemic. You're not popular for managing a pandemic. You're not popular for keeping people at home. You're not popular for being intrusive in people's lives. It's as simple as that. So their low tide moment is coming, maybe a little bit sooner than they would normally have wanted, but they've been front and centre of a pandemic. Both Grant Robertson and Jacinda have dominated those press conferences and the entire approach. They haven't trusted anyone else. They've said, trust us, we are the font of all knowledge. And the country said, we're not so sure about that. And I think there's a bit of pushback on here. You've seen this in the polls as well.
And if Jacinda Ardern was to rise in the polls, particularly on the back of this US trip, what do you think she needs to do?
It always depends whether people are listening. She can only really re-engage with New Zealanders. Maybe this is a bit of a steroid for a new approach, jumping on the horse when she gets back to New Zealand and seen as a bit of a fresh start for the run into the election. They'll have a bribe up their sleeve. Labor always does an election year. They always have a few $1 billion. You've seen it before, interest-free student loans. I think this time you'll see something like, for students who missed out on the budget, so I think you'll see something like 3 years free fees for students or a student allowance of some sort, tax cuts, maybe going to Nationals territory. To beat them, they're going to have to play Nationals game, and it's probably going to tax cut zone, which they fundamentally and philosophically don't like. They don't believe in them. So it'll be interesting to see where they go. But it's not over yet. I'm not saying this is over by any means. she's got the platform and she's got the power of incumbency, but it's a tough one because I think a lot of the public's voted with their remotes.